The dashboard clock in Officer Sarah Mitchell's patrol car read 9:47 p.m. when the call came through. She'd been cruising the quiet streets of suburban Denver, her 7 years with the police department having taught her to recognize when a shift felt off. Tonight had that feeling, the kind of electric tension in the air that made veteran cops check their weapons twice and say extra prayers before heading home. All units, we have a 1091D at 2847 Maple Grove Avenue. Domestic disturbance, neighbors reporting screaming, and possible weapons involved. Proceed with extreme caution. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio with an urgency that made Sarah's pulse quicken. She was only 3 blocks away. Unit 23 responding, Sarah replied, already flipping on her lights and pressing the accelerator. In the back seat, separated by a reinforced partition, her canine partner Rex immediately went on alert. The 4-year-old German Shepherd had been with her for 3 years, and their bond went far beyond the typical handler-dog relationship. They'd been through academy training together, had made dozens of arrests together, and had saved each other's lives more than once. Rex sensed something was wrong. He always did. As Sarah navigated the turns toward Maple Grove Avenue, the dog began whining a low, anxious sound that she'd learned to trust as much as her own instincts. She glanced in the rearview mirror and saw his dark eyes fixed on her, his ears pinned back in concern. "I know, boy. I feel it too," she murmured, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Sarah pulled up to the address, a modest 2-story house with peeling paint and an overgrown lawn. All the lights were off except for a flickering glow in one upstairs window. Her backup was still 4 minutes out, according to dispatch, but the sounds coming from inside the house made waiting impossible. A woman's terrified screams pierced the night air, followed by the unmistakable sound of something or someone being thrown against a wall. Training told her to wait for backup. Instinct told her that woman might not have 4 minutes. Sarah made her decision. She radioed her position and status, then turned to look at Rex one more time. The dog was standing now, his powerful body tense and ready, wanting desperately to go with her. But protocol was clear. Domestic disturbances without confirmed threats didn't require canine deployment. Besides, Sarah had a rule. She never brought Rex into a situation unless she was absolutely certain of what they were facing. "Stay here, boy. I'll be right back," she whispered through the partition, reaching her fingers through the metal grate to touch his wet nose. Rex licked her fingers, his tail dropping in protest. "I promise. 10 minutes, and we'll get you those treats you love. Deal?" Rex whined again, a sound that would haunt Sarah's dreams for months to come, as if he knew something she didn't, as if he was begging her not to go. But Sarah was already out of the car, her hand on her service weapon as she approached the house. The screaming had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow worse. She could hear Rex barking frantically from the patrol car, his sounds growing more desperate with each step she took away from him. Sarah reached the front door and positioned herself to the side, her training kicking in automatically. "Denver Police, open the door," she shouted, her voice firm and authoritative, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Nothing. I'm coming in. If anyone is injured, call out." Sarah tried the doorknob. It turned easily, the door swinging open into darkness. The house smelled of stale cigarettes, alcohol, and something metallic that made her stomach turn. Blood. She'd smelled it enough times to recognize it instantly. She pulled her flashlight with her left hand, keeping her right hand on her weapon. "Police, show yourself." The attack came without warning. A figure burst from the shadows of the hallway, a large man, eyes wild with rage or drugs or both. But it wasn't his size that Sarah registered first. It was the gun in his hand, already raised and pointed directly at her chest. Time slowed to a crawl. Sarah saw the muzzle flash before she heard the sound 3 deafening explosions that shattered the quiet suburban street. The first bullet hit her vest, knocking the wind from her lungs and sending her stumbling backward. The second struck her left side, just below the vest's protection, and she felt the searing pain of metal tearing through flesh. The third caught her in the abdomen. Sarah's legs gave out, and she collapsed on the front porch, her weapon clattering away from her outstretched hand. She could hear shouting backup had arrived and the sounds of the suspect being tackled and handcuffed. But it all seemed distant, like she was underwater. Blood was pooling beneath her, warm and sticky, soaking through her uniform. Her vision blurred as officers surrounded her, their panicked voices mixing together into a chaotic symphony. "Officer down. We need paramedics now. Sarah, stay with us. Look at me. Put pressure on the wound, she's losing too much blood." But Sarah wasn't thinking about her wounds. As her consciousness began to slip away, as the darkness crept in from the edges of her vision, she could hear one sound cutting through everything else. Rex, barking desperately from the patrol car, the sound raw with panic and fear. With the last of her strength, as paramedics lifted her onto a stretcher, Sarah's lips moved. The words were barely audible, blood flecking her lips as she spoke. "Rex ... please. Someone tell Rex ... I'm sorry." And everything went black. 20 feet away, still locked in the patrol car, Rex threw himself against the partition again and again, his frantic barks turning into heartbroken howls that echoed through the night, the sound of a partner who knew, with the certainty that only dogs possess, that the person he loved most in the world was slipping away. The emergency room doors at Denver General Hospital burst open at 10:23 p.m., and what came through would test every skill the trauma team possessed. Officer Sarah Mitchell arrived with paramedics pumping blood into her veins as fast as her body was losing it, her uniform soaked crimson, her lips already turning blue from oxygen deprivation. Female, 29 years old, multiple GSWs to the chest and abdomen. The lead paramedic shouted as they wheeled the gurney through the chaos of the E. 2 liters of saline on scene, blood pressure dropping 80/40 and falling. "We've lost her pulse twice in the ambulance." Dr. James Chun, a 20-year veteran of Denver's busiest trauma center, looked up from the patient he was treating and felt his stomach drop. He'd seen the blue uniform, recognized the police radio still clipped to her belt. Another officer down. The 4th one this year. Trauma Bay 1 now. He barked, abandoning his current patient or resident. "Get me O-negative blood, 4 units, and prep the OR. Call in the entire surgical team. Tell them it's a cop, and she's circling the drain." The trauma bay erupted into controlled chaos. Nurses descended on Sarah like a choreographed dance team, cutting away her uniform, placing new 4 lines, attaching monitors that immediately began screaming warnings. Her blood pressure was in free fall. Her heart rate was erratic, skipping beats like a failing engine. "She's got a through and through in the left flank. Possible liver damage," one nurse called out, her hands covered in blood as she examined the wounds. Another entry wound lower abdomen. "I can't tell where this one exited. Chest wound stopped by the vest. But she's got broken ribs, and possibly a pneumothorax," another added, pressing a stethoscope to Sarah's chest. Breath sounds are diminished on the left side. Dr. Chun worked with the precision of a man who'd done this 1,000 times, but still felt the weight of every single life in his hands. "Get me a chest tube, her lung is collapsing. We need to relieve the pressure before we move her." As he inserted the chest tube between Sarah's ribs, air and blood gushed out, confirmation that her lung had partially collapsed from the blunt trauma of the bullet hitting her vest. Sarah's body jerked involuntarily, but she remained unconscious, her brain already shutting down non-essential functions to preserve itself. Blood pressure 70/35. She's not responding to fluids. A nurse shouted. Because she's bleeding out faster than we can replace it, Dr. Chon said grimly. We're taking her to surgery now. Someone call the family, tell them to get here fast. She might not make it through the night. As they rushed Sarah toward the operating room, the hospital's main entrance was already filling with police officers. Word had spread through the department like wildfire. Officer Mitchell had been shot. Within 30 minutes, the waiting room looked like a sea of blue uniforms. Sergeant Tom Bradley arrived with Rex still in his patrol car, unsure what else to do with the frantic dog. Other canine handlers gathered around the vehicle, but none of them could calm Rex down. Inside Operating Room 3, Dr. Chun and his surgical team were fighting a battle against time in biology. The first bullet had miraculously missed Sarah's major organs, but had shredded through her intestines. The second had clipped her liver, and she was bleeding internally at a catastrophic rate. I need more suction. I can't see anything in here, Dr. Chun said, his hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the dire situation. How's her pressure? Still dropping. 60/30, the anesthesiologist replied, his voice tight with concern. Her heart rate is all over the place. I'm giving her vasopressors, but she's barely responding. She's in hypovolemic shock, Dr. Chun muttered, working faster. We need to find the bleeders and clamp them, or we're going to lose her right here on the table. For 6 brutal hours, the surgical team worked. They repaired the torn section of intestine, carefully stitched the laceration in her liver, and removed bullet fragments that had scattered through her abdominal cavity like shrapnel. They pumped 12 units of blood into her, nearly replacing her entire blood volume, and fought off 2 episodes where her heart simply stopped beating. At 4:37 a.m., Dr. Chun stepped back from the operating table, his scrubs drenched in sweat and blood. Sarah's vital signs had finally stabilized, barely. That's all we can do for now, he said quietly, exhaustion evident in every word. Close her up. We'll keep her in a medically induced coma for at least 72 hours. Her body needs time to heal, and we need to prevent brain swelling from the shock and blood loss. By 5 a.m., Sarah was in the ICU, looking more like a science experiment than a human being. Tubes protruded from her nose, her mouth, her chest, and multiple places in her arms. Machines breathed for her, monitored her, kept her alive through pure medical intervention. Her face was pale as death, bruises already forming around her eyes from the trauma. Janet and Robert Mitchell arrived at 5:15 a.m. with their son Marcus. Having driven 90 miles from Colorado Springs after receiving the devastating phone call, Dr. Chun met them in the hallway outside the ICU, still in his blood-stained scrubs. Your daughter is alive, he began, and watched relief flood their faces before he continued with the harder truth. But the next 48 hours are critical. She's on a ventilator. She's received massive transfusions, and her body has been through tremendous trauma. We won't know the full extent of any organ damage for days. Right now, we just need her to stabilize. Can we see her? Janet asked, her voice breaking. Dr. Chun nodded and led them to Sarah's room. Janet gasped when she saw her daughter, her hand flying to her mouth. Robert wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders, his own eyes filling with tears. Marcus, Sarah's 24-year-old brother, simply stood frozen in the doorway, unable to process the sight of his invincible big sister reduced to this. Talk to her, Dr. Chun encouraged gently. Even in a coma, patients can sometimes hear familiar voices. It might help. Janet approached the bed slowly, taking Sarah's hand carefully to avoid the 4 lines. Baby, it's Mom. We're here. Dad and Marcus are here. You're going to be okay. You hear me? You're going to be okay. But as the hours passed, something strange began happening, something that concerned every nurse on the ICU floor. Every 2 to 3 hours, Sarah's monitors would suddenly go haywire. Her heart rate would spike from 70 to 140 beats per minute. Her blood pressure would surge. Her hands would twitch and reach outward, as if grasping for something. Then, just as suddenly, everything would crash back down. "It's like she's searching for something," one nurse whispered to another during the morning shift change. "Like she's agitated about something even in the coma. Probably just post-traumatic stress responses," the other nurse replied. Her brain processing the trauma. But they were both wrong. 20 miles away, at the exact same moments, Sarah's monitors were spiking. Rex was having his own episodes, throwing himself against his kennel door, howling with an anguish that made hardened police officers tear up, refusing food and water, his own heart rate elevated to dangerous levels. Two souls, separated by distance and circumstance, were calling out to each other in the only way they could. And neither of them knew if the other was even still alive. Sergeant Tom Bradley had been with the Denver Police Department's K-9 unit for 15 years, and in that time, he'd worked with dozens of dogs. German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, Bloodhounds, he'd seen them all, trained them all, understood their behaviors and instincts better than most people understood other humans. But in all those years, he had never not once seen anything like what was happening with Rex. The German Shepherd sat motionless in front of Sarah's locker at the police station, his dark eyes fixed on the metal door, as if he could will it to open through sheer force of concentration. He'd been there for 6 hours straight, refusing to move, refusing to eat, barely even blinking. When other officers approached to comfort him or try to coax him away, Rex would bare his teeth, not in aggression, but in desperate warning. "Leave me alone. I'm waiting for her." "Come on, boy," Bradley said softly, kneeling beside the dog on the cold concrete floor. "She's not here. She's at the hospital. She's getting help." At the word hospital, Rex's ears perked up slightly, and he let out a whine, so heartbroken that Bradley felt his throat tighten. The dog knew. Somehow, he knew that Sarah was hurt, possibly dying, and he couldn't reach her. "Let's get you home. Get you some food and water." Bradley tried again, reaching for Rex's collar. The reaction was instantaneous. Rex bolted, pulling away from Bradley's grip with surprising strength, and took off running through the station. Officers jumped out of the way as the 70-pound dog sprinted through hallways, past the briefing room, through the bullpen, and straight out the front doors that someone had just opened. "Rex, stop!" Bradley shouted, chasing after him with 3 other officers. But Rex wasn't stopping. He ran with purpose, with direction, his powerful legs eating up the pavement as he raced down the street. For a terrifying moment, Bradley thought the dog was going to run straight into traffic, but Rex was too well trained for that. He stayed on the sidewalk, weaving between startled pedestrians, his nose to the air as if tracking a scent only he could detect. 20 minutes later, they found him sitting outside Denver General Hospital's emergency room entrance, looking up at the building with those same heartbroken eyes. He'd run 2.5 miles, navigating turns and intersections he'd never traveled before, to find the one place Sarah might be. How did he ... Officer Jennifer Martinez breathed, stunned. How did he know where to go? "I have no idea," Bradley admitted, approaching Rex slowly this time. "But we need to get him out of here before security calls animal control." This time, Rex didn't resist when Bradley clipped the leash to his collar. But as they led him away from the hospital, the dog's legs seemed to give out. He lay down on the pavement and refused to move, a low, continuous whine emanating from deep in his chest. It was the sound of complete and utter despair. By the 3rd day, the situation had gone from concerning to critical. Rex had been staying with Bradley at his home, but the dog's condition was deteriorating rapidly. He'd eaten maybe a handful of kibble in 72 hours. He'd drunk barely any water. His eyes were sunken, his ribs starting to show, and he'd developed a strange behavior that terrified everyone who witnessed it. Every few hours, Rex would suddenly become frantic, pacing in circles, whining, scratching at doors and walls, his whole body trembling. Then, just as suddenly, he would collapse in exhaustion. Bradley had started documenting these episodes, noting the times they occurred. That's when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Rex's episodes were happening at the exact same times that, according to the ICU, nurses he'd been in contact with Sarah's monitors were spiking. 8:45 a. Rex frantic. Sarah's heart rate, 142 BPM. 11:30 a.m. Rex frantic. Sarah's blood pressure, dangerously elevated. 2:15 p.m. Rex frantic. Sarah reaching out in her coma. 5 p.m. Rex frantic. Sarah's vitals unstable. They're connected, Bradley told his wife that night, showing her his notes. I know it sounds crazy, but they're literally feeling each other's distress. Tom, that's not possible, she said gently. You're exhausted. You're seeing patterns that aren't there. But Bradley knew better. He'd seen the bond between canine officers and their partners before, but this was something deeper, something that transcended normal understanding. On the morning of the fourth day, Bradley called Dr. Amanda Rivera, the department's consulting veterinarian, for an emergency house call. Dr. Rivera was a specialist in working dogs police K-9 South, search and rescue dogs, military service animals. She'd seen stress, she'd seen trauma, she'd seen dogs grieving for fallen handlers. But when she examined Rex, her expression grew grave. His heart rate is extremely elevated, 140 beats per minute, when it should be around 70, she said, her stethoscope pressed to Rex's chest. His temperature is slightly elevated, suggesting stress-induced inflammation. He's dehydrated despite your efforts to get him to drink. And look at this. She gently pulled back Rex's lip to show his gums, which should have been pink and healthy. Instead, they were pale, almost white. He's shutting down, Dr. Rivera said quietly. I've seen this before in dogs who lose their handlers, especially in traumatic circumstances. They go into a grief response so severe that their bodies start failing. It's called broken heart syndrome, and it's very real. What can we do? Bradley asked, his hand resting on Rex's head. The dog barely acknowledged the touch, his eyes distant and hollow. Dr. Rivera was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that seemed impossible. The only thing that might save him is seeing Sarah. Physical contact, confirmation that she's alive. Without that, he's convincing himself she's dead, and his body is following his mind into shutdown. But she's in the ICU, Bradley protested. They don't allow animals, especially not in critical care. I know, Dr. Rivera interrupted. But you need to understand something, Sergeant. If this continues for another 2 or 3 days, we're going to lose Rex. His organs will start failing from the stress hormones flooding his system. He'll develop acute kidney failure. His heart will give out, or he'll simply stop eating and drinking until his body can't sustain itself anymore. She looked Bradley directly in the eyes. This dog is dying of a broken heart. And unless someone figures out how to get him to Sarah, or convinces him she's alive and coming back, there's nothing I can do to save him. That night, Bradley sat at his kitchen table with a laptop, researching everything he could find about animal-assisted therapy, emotional support animals in hospitals, and the psychological bond between humans and dogs. What he found was a growing body of research suggesting that the connection wasn't just emotional, it was physiological. Studies showed that when bonded pairs were separated under traumatic circumstances, both parties experienced measurable physical distress, elevated cortisol, increased heart rates, disrupted sleep patterns, even compromised immune systems. He found articles about therapy dogs visiting patients in hospitals, about emotional support animals being allowed in certain medical facilities, about the measurable benefits of animal contact during recovery. But nothing about allowing a canine into an ICU, nothing about bending the rules for a dog and his handler, who are literally dying without each other. At 2 a.m., Bradley was still awake when Rex had another episode, the worst one yet. The dog suddenly leaped up from his bed, threw himself against the bedroom door with such force that the wood cracked, and began howling. Not barking howling. A sound so primal, so filled with anguish that Bradley's wife woke up crying, covering her ears. Bradley grabbed his phone and called the ICU nurses station at Denver General. "This is Sergeant Bradley with Denver PD. I need to know, was Officer Mitchell just having an episode?" "Around 2 a.m.? There was a pause, then the nurse came back on the line. "How did you know that?" "Yes, her monitors just went crazy. Her heart rate hit 160, her blood pressure spiked, and she became so agitated, we almost had to sedate her further. It just happened 5 minutes ago." Bradley closed his eyes. There was no more denying it. Sarah and Rex were connected by something that science couldn't fully explain, but couldn't deny either. "I need to speak with her doctor," Bradley said. "It's urgent. It's literally life or death." "For Officer Mitchell?" "No," Bradley said, looking at Rex, who had collapsed on the floor, his chest heaving, his eyes glazed. "For both of them." Day 5 began with what the ICU nurses were calling the miracle. Sarah Mitchell's eyes fluttered open for the first time since the shooting. After 116 hours in a medically induced coma, after countless critical moments where her survival hung by a thread, her brain was finally ready to wake up. Dr. James Chun was at her bedside within minutes of getting the call. "Sarah, can you hear me? If you can understand me, squeeze my hand." Sarah's fingers twitched weakly around his. Her eyes, though unfocused and glassy, were open and moving, trying to make sense of the tubes, the machines, the sterile white ceiling of the ICU. "You're at Denver General Hospital," Dr. Chon explained gently, watching her pupils respond to light. "You were shot 5 days ago. You've been through surgery, but you're stable now. You're going to be okay." Janet Mitchell rushed to the other side of the bed, tears streaming down her face. "Baby, oh my God, baby, you're awake. We've been so scared. We thought—" Her voice broke, unable to finish the sentence. Sarah's lips moved, but no sound came out at first. The ventilator tube had been removed that morning in anticipation of her waking, but her throat was raw and damaged from days of intubation. She tried again, and this time a barely audible whisper emerged. "Where ... Where what, sweetheart?" Janet leaned closer, desperate to understand. "Where's Rex?" The words hit the room like a physical force. Janet pulled back slightly, exchanging glances with Dr. Chun. Of all the things they'd expected Sarah to ask about her injuries, what happened? If she was going to survive, none of them had anticipated this. "Rex is fine, honey," Janet said quickly, though she honestly had no idea if that was true. "He's being taken care of. Don't worry about need Rex." Sarah's agitation was immediate and alarming. Her heart rate, which had been a steady 78 beats per minute, suddenly spiked to 105. "Where is he? Need to see?" "Sarah, you need to stay calm," Dr. Chon interjected, his eyes on the monitors. "Your body has been through tremendous trauma. Getting agitated is dangerous right now." But Sarah wasn't listening. Tears began streaming down her face, and her breathing became rapid and shallow. "He thinks I'm dead. He thinks I left him. Please, please. I can feel him. He's dying. Sarah, that's not possible, Janet said, trying to soothe her daughter. You can't feel. I can. The scream that erupted from Sarah's damaged throat was horrifying, raw and primal, and filled with such desperation that nurses from other rooms came running. I can feel him. Every time he panics, I feel it. Every time I panic, he feels it. We're connected. You don't understand. The monitors erupted in a cacophony of alarms. Sarah's heart rate hit 145. Her blood pressure spiked to 180/110th stroke territory. Her oxygen saturation began dropping as her panicked breathing threw off her respiratory rhythm. Sarah, stop. You're going to hurt yourself. Dr. Chun shouted, reaching for emergency medication. Then bring me my dog. Sarah screamed, fighting against the IV lines, trying to sit up despite the surgical wounds in her abdomen. Bring me Rex, or I swear to God, I'll rip these tubes out and go find him myself. It took 3 nurses and Dr. Chun to restrain her gently without causing further injury. They administered a mild sedative, not enough to put her back under, but enough to take the edge off her panic. As the medication took effect, Sarah's struggles weakened, but the tears kept flowing. He's all I have, she whispered brokenly, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. 7 years on the force, and he's the only one who's never let me down. He saved my life 4 times. 4 times. And now he thinks I abandoned him. I can feel his heart breaking. I can feel it. Janet looked at Dr. Chun helplessly. The doctor's expression was troubled as he studied the monitors. Sarah's vitals had calmed somewhat with the sedative, but her psychological distress was undeniable, and it was manifesting physically in ways that could impede her recovery. I'll be right back, Dr. Chun said quietly, stepping out of the room. In the hallway, he pulled out his phone and found 3 missed calls from someone named S.G. Bradley. There was also a voicemail marked urgent. Dr. Chun pressed play and listened to a message that made him stop walking mid-stride. Dr. Chun, this is Sergeant Tom Bradley with Denver PD K-9 Unit. I'm Rex's Supervisor Officer Mitchell's K-9 partner. I need to speak with you urgently about both of their conditions. Rex is dying. I'm not being dramatic. He's literally shutting down from grief. Our veterinarian says he has maybe 48 hours before organ failure. And I've been documenting something that you need to see. Their episodes are synchronized. When one panics, the other panics, at the exact same time. I have timestamps that prove it. Please call me back. This is literally life or death for both of them. Dr. Chun stood in the hospital corridor, his mind racing. In 20 years of practicing medicine, he'd learned to trust evidence over emotion, science over sentiment. But he'd also learned that medicine wasn't just about bodies. It was about people. And sometimes people defied clinical expectations in ways that couldn't be fully explained by textbooks. He called Bradley back immediately. Sergeant, this is Dr. Chun. Tell me everything. For the next 20 minutes, Bradley laid out the case like a prosecutor presenting evidence. He sent photos of Rex's deteriorating condition, veterinary reports showing his declining health, and most compellingly, a spreadsheet with 2 columns, one showing the times of Sarah's episodes in the ICU, the other showing Rex's episodes at home. The correlation was undeniable. They're bonded in a way that's affecting their physical health, Bradley concluded. I know how this sounds. I know it seems impossible. But I have a veterinarian and an entire canine unit that will testify to what we're seeing. This dog needs to see Sarah, and Sarah needs to see this dog. It might be the only thing that saves both of them. Dr. Chun was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question that would change everything. How quickly can you get Rex here? 30 minutes, Bradley said immediately. But the ICU doesn't allow animals. I'm aware of our policies, Sergeant, Dr. Chon interrupted. Let me worry about that. You worry about getting that dog healthy enough to make the visit. Get him to eat something, get him hydrated, and get him ready. I need to make some calls. After hanging up, Dr. Chon stood in the hallway, facing the biggest decision of his medical career. He could follow protocol, maintain the sterile integrity of the ICU, and hope that Sarah's psychological distress would resolve with time and therapy. Or he could do something unprecedented, potentially controversial, and possibly career-damaging, but something that might actually save his patient's life. He thought about Sarah's words. I can feel him dying. He thought about the synchronized episodes that defied medical explanation. He thought about the Hippocratic oath he'd taken. First, do no harm. But also, I will apply all measures which are required for the benefit of the patient. Dr. Chun pulled out his phone and dialed a number he rarely called the direct line to Hospital Administrator Patricia Wong's office. Patricia, it's James Chun. I need an emergency meeting with you, the infection control team, and legal. Yes, right now. It's regarding Officer Mitchell in ICU. No, she's stable physically. But I need to make a request that's going to sound insane, and I need you to hear me out before you say no. Inside her ICU room, Sarah lay quietly, the sedative making her drowsy but not unconscious. Janet held her hand, watching her daughter's lips move in silent words. Janet leaned closer and finally made out what Sarah was repeating over and over like a prayer. Hold on, Rex. Hold on. I'm coming. Don't give up on me. Please don't give up. 20 miles away, Rex lay on his side in Bradley's living room, his breathing shallow, his eyes half closed. But at that exact moment, his ear twitched, and for the first time in 5 days, his tail gave one weak thump against the floor. As if somehow, across the distance and against all logic, he'd heard her. The emergency meeting convened in Hospital Administrator Patricia Wong's office at 2:37 p.m., exactly 14 minutes after Dr. Chun's phone call. Around the mahogany conference table sat some of the most powerful people in Denver General Hospital. Patricia Wong herself, a formidable woman who'd run the hospital for 12 years. Dr. Margaret Sutton, head of infection control. David Reeves from legal. Dr. Chun. And Chief Nursing Officer Linda Hayes, who'd been summoned from a budget meeting. James, you have exactly 10 minutes to convince me why I shouldn't have you evaluated for exhaustion-induced delusion, Patricia said, her tone sharp but not unkind. You want to bring a police dog into my ICU? Not just any dog, Dr. Chun corrected, pulling up his laptop. A K-9 officer's service partner. And yes, I know how it sounds. But I need you to look at this data before you dismiss it. He projected Bradley's spreadsheet onto the conference room screen, 2 columns of timestamps. One red, one blue, showing the eerie synchronization between Sarah's episodes and Rex's. What am I looking at? Dr. Sutton asked, leaning forward. Evidence of a physiological connection between Officer Mitchell and her K-9 partner that's affecting both of their survival, Dr. Chun explained. These red timestamps are from Sarah's ICU monitor's times when her heart rate spiked above 140. Her blood pressure became dangerously elevated, and she showed signs of extreme agitation, even while comatose. These blue timestamps are from the K-9 supervisor's documentation of Rex's panic episodes. Linda Hayes studied the screen, her eyes widening. They're identical, down to the minute. Sometimes down to the exact second, Dr. Chun confirmed. 8:45 a.m., both in distress. 11:30 a.m., both in distress. 2:15 p.m., both in distress. This has been happening for 5 days straight. It's not coincidence. It's not random. There's a documented physiological connection between these two that's manifesting in measurable, dangerous ways. That's not scientifically possible, Dr. Sutton said flatly. Neither is the placebo effect, technically, but it exists. Dr. Chun shot back. Neither is the measurable health benefits of prayer, but studies confirm it. Neither is the documented phenomenon of elderly couples dying within days of each other after 60-year marriages, but it happens regularly. We don't understand the mechanism, but we can't deny the evidence. David Reeves, the lawyer, cleared his throat. Even if we accept this connection as real, which I'm not saying I do, the liability issues are enormous. If we allow an animal into the ICU and another patient contracts an infection, we're looking at a massive lawsuit. If the dog becomes aggressive and injures someone, we're liable. If this sets a precedent and every patient starts demanding their pet's visit, I'm not proposing we allow every golden retriever and house cat into the hospital, Dr. Chon interrupted. This is a unique situation involving a highly trained service animal and a critically ill patient, whose psychological distress is creating life-threatening physical symptoms. This morning, when Sarah woke up and realized Rex wasn't here, her blood pressure hit 180/110. That's stroke territory. Her heart rate was 145. She became so agitated, we had to physically restrain her and sedate her. And according to the canine supervisor, Rex had a simultaneous episode so severe he caused organ damage. Patricia Wong rubbed her temples. What does the veterinarian say about the dog's condition? Dr. Chun pulled up another document. Dr. Amanda Rivera, the police department's consulting veterinarian, examined Rex this morning. Her report states, and I quote, "Patient is experiencing acute stress-induced cardiomyopathy, early-stage kidney dysfunction, and severe psychological trauma consistent with separation anxiety disorder. Without intervention, prognosis is poor. Estimated survival without reunification, 24 to 48 hours. The room fell silent. The dog is dying, Linda Hayes said quietly. And so is our patient, just more slowly. Exactly, Dr. Chun said. I'm not asking you to make a decision based on emotion. I'm asking you to make a decision based on evidence. We have two patients, yes. One happens to be a dog. But he's a police service animal, so legally he's protected under different statutes than a pet, who are physiologically connected in a way we don't fully understand. Both are in critical condition. Both are declining. And I believe that separation is the primary cause of their decline. Dr. Sutton was shaking her head. The infection protocols alone can be managed, Dr. Chun interrupted. We require a full veterinary health screening, showing Rex is current on all vaccinations and free of parasites and diseases. We have him bathed with medical-grade antimicrobial shampoo. We put protective booties on his paws. We limit the visit to 15 minutes maximum. We clear the ICU corridor and allow no other patients or visitors during the visit. We have minimal staff present, only essential personnel. We document everything. And we make it clear this is a one-time exception under extraordinary circumstances, not a precedent for general visitation. Patricia Wong looked at David Reeves. Legal implications? Reeves sighed heavily. If we do this and something goes wrong, we're exposed. But if we don't do this and Officer Mitchell's condition deteriorates because of psychological distress we could have alleviated, we're also exposed. Medical malpractice includes failure to provide reasonable care that could benefit the patient. If this could be considered reasonable care under extraordinary circumstances. He trailed off, clearly conflicted. What about the research? Linda Hayes asked. Is there any precedent for this kind of intervention? Dr. Chun nodded, pulling up another document. Animal-assisted therapy in hospital settings has shown measurable benefits: reduced blood pressure, decreased pain perception, improved mood, faster recovery times. There are documented cases of therapy dogs visiting hospital patients with remarkable results. Johns Hopkins has a program. UCLA has a program. Mayo Clinic has published research on it. We'd be extending an existing concept to a critical care setting under controlled conditions. Those are therapy dogs visiting stable patients, Dr. Sutton countered. Not service animals visiting ICU patients on the edge of survival. Which is exactly why this patient needs it more, Dr. Chun said. The research shows benefits for stable patients. Imagine the potential benefit for a patient in crisis. Patricia Wong stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. The room waited in tense silence. She'd built her reputation on being tough but fair, on making difficult decisions that prioritized patient care while protecting the hospital. This decision could define her legacy, either as innovative and compassionate or as reckless and foolish. "What's the K-9 supervisor's timeline?" she asked without turning around. "He says he can have Rex here in 30 minutes, Dr. Chun replied. "But the dog needs to eat and drink first, and be examined by the veterinarian one more time to ensure he's stable enough for the visit." Patricia turned back to face the room. "Here's what's going to happen. David, I need you to draft emergency protocol documentation for a one-time animal visitation under extraordinary medical circumstances. Make it so specific to this case that it can't be used as precedent for general pet visitation. Margaret, I need infection control protocols in writing. Everything from the veterinary screening requirements to the cleaning procedures post-visit. Linda, coordinate with ICU staff. I want only volunteers working this, no one who's uncomfortable with the decision. And James," she looked directly at Dr. Chun, "if this goes wrong, if that patient's condition worsens, if we have any infection outbreaks, any complications whatsoever, you own it. Understood?" Dr. Chun nodded. "Understood." "Then make the call," Patricia said. "Tell them to bring the dog. We'll do this tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., before regular visiting hours. That gives us time to prepare properly and gives the dog time to stabilize." "But James, this is one time. One visit. 15 minutes. And then this never happened. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear," Dr. Chun said, already reaching for his phone. As the meeting dispersed, Linda Hayes caught up with Patricia in the hallway. "You know the board is going to lose their minds when they find out." Patricia smiled grimly. "Then they can fire me. But at least I'll get fired knowing I tried to save a patient's life instead of protecting my liability insurance." Within the hour, Sergeant Bradley received the call he'd been praying for. Dr. Rivera was dispatched to examine Rex immediately. The K-9 unit sprang into action, preparing their partner for the most important visit of his life. And in her ICU bed, Sarah Mitchell slept fitfully, unaware that tomorrow morning her world was about to change forever. Day 7, 5:47 a.m. Denver General Hospital's ICU floor was quieter than it had been in years. Every non-essential staff member had been sent to other floors. Security had cordoned off the entire wing. The 3 other ICU patients had been briefed and had given their consent for the unprecedented event about to unfold. In the staff locker room, Dr. Chun pulled on fresh scrubs for the 3rd time that morning, his hands trembling slightly. He'd performed hundreds of high-risk surgeries without this level of anxiety, but somehow this felt more significant. He wasn't just treating a patient's body, he was treating something medicine barely acknowledged, the soul-deep bond between 2 beings that transcended conventional understanding. Nurse Linda Hayes approached him, her own eyes red from lack of sleep. "Sarah's awake. We told her Rex is coming. She's been crying for 20 minutes straight." "Good tears or bad tears?" Dr. Chun asked. "I honestly can't tell anymore," Linda admitted. "But her vitals have been the most stable they've been since she arrived. It's like her body knows something good is about to happen. Outside, in the hospital's loading bay, Sergeant Tom Bradley sat in his patrol car with Rex in the back seat. The German Shepherd looked nothing like the vigorous police canine he'd been a week ago. His ribs were visible beneath his coat, his eyes were sunken, and he moved with the lethargy of a much older dog. But 2 hours ago, when Bradley had told him, "We're going to see," Sarah, something had sparked. In those dark eyes, a flicker of hope that had been absent for days. Dr. Amanda Rivera had examined Rex at 4 a.m. and declared him stable enough for the visit barely. She'd given him subcutaneous fluids, administered anti-anxiety medication to keep him calm, and even managed to get him to eat half a can of wet food, his first substantial meal in 6 days. "You ready, boy?" Bradley asked, checking his watch. 5:53 a.m., 7 minutes until the most unusual call of duty in his 15-year career. Rex's tail thumped once against the seat, weak but present. At exactly 6 a.m., Bradley's phone rang. "Bring him in," Dr. Chun's voice said simply. Bradley attached Rex's leash and opened the car door. The dog jumped down carefully, his movements stiff and painful, but deliberate. They'd bathed him twice with hospital-grade antimicrobial shampoo that morning. His paws were fitted with sterile blue booties that made him walk awkwardly, lifting each foot high like he was stepping through puddles. Under normal circumstances, the sight would have been comical. Today, it was heartbreaking. They entered through the emergency bay entrance, where a security escort waited. The walk through the hospital corridors felt eternal. Rex's nose was working overtime, processing thousands of scents: disinfectant, illness, fear, medication, death. But underneath it all, he was searching for one specific scent. Her scent. They reached the ICU floor. The elevator doors opened to reveal Dr. Chun, Linda Hayes, and 2 other nurses, the absolute minimum staff required. Everyone else had been cleared out. "Sergeant Bradley," Dr. Chun said formally, as if they were about to perform surgery rather than facilitate a visit. "We have 15 minutes. Stay close to Rex at all times. If he shows any signs of aggression or distress, the visit ends immediately." "Understood?" "Understood," Bradley replied. "But Doc, this dog hasn't got an aggressive bone in his body. He's just been dying of heartbreak." They walked down the ICU corridor, their footsteps echoing in the unusual silence. As they approached room 317, Rex suddenly stopped. His whole body went rigid. His ears shot forward. His nose lifted to the air, nostrils flaring. He smelled her. A sound emerged from Rex's throat, not quite a whine, not quite a cry, something primal and desperate that made every person in that hallway fight back tears. Inside room 317, Sarah Mitchell heard it too. She'd been told Rex was coming, had been warned to stay calm, to keep her vitals stable, to not move suddenly because of her surgical wounds. But the moment she heard that sound, a sound only Rex made, a sound she'd heard 1,000 times before, every medical instruction evaporated from her mind. "He's here," she sobbed to her mother, who sat beside the bed. "Janet, he's here. He came for me." Dr. Chun opened the door slowly. "Are you ready, Sarah?" She nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming down her face. "Okay, Sergeant." "Bring him in." Bradley and Rex stepped through the doorway, and time seemed to stop. The moment Rex's eyes locked onto Sarah, he transformed. The sick, lethargic, dying dog vanished, replaced by something elemental and powerful. He pulled against the leash, not aggressively, but with desperate purpose. "Easy, boy," Bradley said, but his voice was thick with emotion. "Let him go," Dr. Chun said quietly. "Let him go to her." Bradley unclipped the leash. Rex didn't run. Running would have been reckless, undignified, wrong for what this moment meant. Instead, he walked with deliberate, almost reverent steps toward Sarah's bed. His eyes never left her face. His ears were forward, his tail beginning to wag slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Sarah's arm reached down from the bed, 4 lines trailing from her wrist like delicate vines. "Rex," she whispered. "My good boy. My brave boy. I'm here. I came back to you." Rex reached the bed and gently, carefully, as if he understood her fragility with perfect clarity, he placed his massive head on the edge of the mattress, right under her outstretched hand. The moment her fingers touched his fur really touched it, confirming he was real and present and alive. Both of them released sounds that no one in that room would ever forget. Rex made a noise between a whimper and a groan, a sound of such pure relief and joy that it seemed to come from the very core of his being. Sarah sobbed openly, her fingers burying themselves in his fur, feeling the warmth of him, the solidness of him, the impossible reality of him. "I'm sorry," she wept, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm so sorry I left you. I'm sorry you were scared. I'm sorry you thought I was gone. I would never leave you. Never. Do you hear me? Never." Rex pressed closer, his brown eyes staring up at her with such intensity it felt like he was looking directly into her soul. His tail was wagging so hard now that his entire back half was moving, the sterile booties making soft squeaking sounds against the floor. Every monitor in the room told the same story. Sarah's heart rate, which had been bouncing erratically between 90 and 130 for days, settled into a perfect, steady 72 beats per minute. Her blood pressure, which had spiked dangerously with every episode of distress, normalized to 118/75 textbook perfect. Her respiratory rate slowed and deepened. Even her oxygen saturation improved. Dr. Chon stood transfixed by the monitors, watching real-time biofeedback that shouldn't be possible. He'd read about the physiological effects of human-animal bonding in research journals, the release of oxytocin, the reduction in cortisol, the activation of parasympathetic nervous system responses. But seeing it happen in real time, watching a critically ill patient's body respond to emotional healing with measurable physical improvements, was something else entirely. "Oh my God," Linda Hayes whispered, staring at the same monitors. "Look at her vitals. They're perfect. They're absolutely perfect." Sergeant Bradley watched his canine partner, who 12 hours ago had been given less than 2 days to live transformed before his eyes. Rex's breathing had evened out. The desperate, panicked energy that had consumed him for a week was gone, replaced by deep contentment. His eyes, which had been dull and distant, were bright and focused. Janet Mitchell stood in the corner, her hand over her mouth, watching her daughter experience something she'd never seen before, complete and total peace. For 6 days, Sarah had been fighting to survive, fighting to wake up, fighting against pain and fear and desperation. But now, with Rex beside her, the fight was over. She could finally rest. "Good boy," Sarah kept repeating, like a mantra, like a prayer. "Such a good boy. The best boy. You waited for me. You knew I'd come back. You knew." Rex's tail never stopped wagging. His eyes never left her face. And slowly, carefully, as if asking permission, he shifted his weight and placed one massive paw on the edge of the bed, leaning more of his head and neck onto the mattress, getting as close to Sarah as physically possible. The 15 minutes passed in what felt like both seconds and hours. No one wanted to interrupt. No one wanted to end it. But finally, Dr. Chon checked his watch and knew he had to. "Sergeant," he said softly, "it's time." The words hit the room like a death sentence. Sarah's grip on Rex's fur tightened. "No, please, not yet. Sarah, we agreed. 15 minutes. For both your safety and his." Please, she begged, her voice breaking. 5 more minutes, please. Dr. Chun looked at the monitors, at her perfect vitals, at the profound healing happening in this room. He looked at Linda Hayes, who nodded almost imperceptibly. 5 more minutes, he conceded. But then he has to go. He needs rest, and so do you. Those final 5 minutes were spent in near silence. Sarah's fingers traced the familiar contours of Rex's head, the soft spot between his ears, the ridge of his muzzle, the velvet of his ears. Rex remained perfectly still, as if he too understood that these moments were precious and finite. When the time finally came, Bradley approached gently. Come on, Rex, we have to go now. Rex looked up at Bradley, then back at Sarah, confusion and sadness in his eyes. The transformation began within hours, and it defied every piece of conventional medical wisdom Dr. James Chun had learned in his 20-year career. At 10 a.m., just 4 hours after Rex's visit, Sarah Mitchell asked for breakfast. Real food, not the 4 nutrition she'd been surviving on. The request stunned her nurse so completely that she had to ask Sarah to repeat it. I'm hungry, Sarah said, her voice still raspy but stronger. Like, really hungry. Can I have scrambled eggs? And toast? Maybe some orange juice? The nurse checked Sarah's chart, her eyes widening. Post-operative abdominal surgery patients typically took days to regain their appetite, often requiring coaxing, just to take a few bites of broth. Sarah hadn't eaten solid food in 7 days. Her digestive system had been through massive trauma. By all medical logic, she shouldn't be hungry at all. Let me check with Dr. Chun, the nurse said. Already pulling out her phone, Dr. Chun arrived within 10 minutes. Examining Sarah with the careful attention of a scientist, observing an impossible phenomenon. Her color had improved. The grayish pallor that had hung over her since surgery had been replaced by a healthy pink flush. Her eyes were clear and focused, no longer glazed with pain medication. Most remarkably, when he checked her surgical wounds, the inflammation that had been present yesterday had noticeably decreased. How's your pain level? He asked, studying her face for signs of distress. Maybe a 3 out of 10? Sarah said, considering. Yesterday, it was a 7 even with the morphine. Today, it's just ... manageable. Honestly, Doc, I feel like a different person than I did 12 hours ago. Dr. Chun pulled up her vitals history on his tablet and stared at the graphs. Prior to Rex's visit, Sarah's heart rate had been erratic, spiking and crashing unpredictably. Her blood pressure had been a roller coaster of dangerous highs and concerning lows. Her oxygen saturation had required supplemental oxygen. But since 6 a.m., the exact moment Rex had entered her room, every single metric had stabilized and maintained stability. No spikes, no crashes. Just steady, healthy numbers that suggested a patient well on her way to recovery. This is remarkable, he muttered, more to himself than to Sarah. Your recovery trajectory has accelerated by what I can only estimate is 40 to 50%. It's Rex, Sarah said simply, as if this explained everything. I told you. We're connected. When he's okay, I'm okay. Now that I know he's alive, and I've seen him, my body can actually heal. Before, I was just ... stuck, trapped between living and giving up. Dr. Chun wanted to argue, wanted to cite alternative explanations, a natural progression of healing, the body's resilience, the effects of reduced stress hormones. But the data didn't lie. He'd seen thousands of trauma patients, and none of them had shown this kind of dramatic improvement in such a short time frame without some significant intervention. I'm going to approve solid foods, he said, making notes in her chart. Start light eggs, toast, nothing too heavy. We'll see how your system handles it. But Sarah, I need you to understand that this doesn't mean you're out of the woods. You still have weeks of recovery ahead of you. I know, Sarah said, and for the first time since waking up, she smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. But now I have a reason to do the work. I have to get better, so I can go home to Rex. 20 miles away, at Sergeant Bradley's house, Rex was experiencing his own miraculous transformation. After returning from the hospital, the German shepherd had immediately gone to his water bowl and drank deeply, the first time he'd voluntarily hydrated in days. Then he'd eaten an entire bowl of food without prompting. Then he'd curled up on the couch and slept for 6 straight hours, not the fitful, anxious semi-consciousness of the past week, but deep, restorative sleep with steady breathing and occasional happy dream twitches. When he woke up at 3 p.m., Bradley could hardly believe he was looking at the same dog. Rex's eyes were bright and alert. His tail wagged when Bradley entered the room. He even brought Bradley his favorite toy, a battered tennis ball he hadn't touched since the shooting, and dropped it at his feet with an expectant look. "You want to play?" Bradley asked, his voice catching. "Buddy, you couldn't even stand up yesterday, and now you want to play?" Rex barked a strong, healthy bark that echoed through the house and wagged his tail harder. Bradley threw the ball gently down the hallway. Rex bounded after it with energy that seemed impossible given his condition just hours earlier. Dr. Rivera, who'd been scheduled to make an afternoon house call to check on Rex, arrived to find him playing tug-of-war with Bradley, his tail wagging non-stop. "What in the world?" she breathed, setting down her medical bag. "Tom, this dog was in acute organ failure this morning. His kidney values were critically elevated. His heart rate was dangerously high. He was dehydrated and malnourished. And now he's playing?" "He saw Sarah," Bradley said simply. 3 hours with her, and he's like he got a full blood transfusion and a miracle cure." Dr. Rivera knelt down and examined Rex, running her hands over his body, checking his gums, listening to his heart and lungs. Everything she found contradicted what she'd documented just 12 hours earlier. His gums were pink and healthy. His heart rate was normal. His breathing was clear. Even his ribs, which had been prominently visible that morning, seemed less pronounced, though she knew that was impossible. He couldn't have gained weight that fast. "I need to run blood work," she said, pulling out her equipment, "because what I'm seeing doesn't make medical sense." The results came back 2 hours later, and Dr. Rivera had to read them 3 times to believe what she was seeing. Rex's kidney values, which had been in the dangerous zone that morning, had dropped back to nearly normal levels. His white blood cell count, which had been elevated due to stress, had normalized. His cortisol levels, the stress hormone that had been off the charts, had plummeted to healthy ranges. "It's like his body just decided to heal itself," she told Bradley over the phone. "I've never seen anything like this. Physiologically, it's as if the visit to Sarah flipped a switch in his system that said, 'Okay, she's alive. We can stop the emergency protocols now.'" Back at Denver General Hospital, Sarah's progress continued to astound everyone. By evening, she was sitting up in bed without assistance, something that typically took abdominal surgery patients 3 to 4 days to accomplish. She was eating regular meals and keeping everything down. Most remarkably, Dr. Chun had been able to reduce her pain medication by half because she simply didn't need it anymore. "The pain is still there," Sarah explained to her mother and Dr. Chun during evening rounds. "But it's different now. Before, every breath hurt like my body was screaming at me to give up. Now it just hurts like I'm healing. Does that make sense?" "Perfectly," Dr. Chun said, though he was still struggling to reconcile what he was observing with everything he knew about post-trauma recovery. That night, for the first time since the shooting, Sarah slept naturally, no sedatives, no sleep aids, just pure, restful sleep. Her monitors showed none of the previous disturbances. No sudden spikes in heart rate. No episodes of agitation. Just 8 straight hours of peaceful rest. The night nurse, checking on her at 2 a.m., found Sarah sleeping with a small smile on her face. One hand resting on her chest, as if she could feel Rex's presence even in sleep. And 20 miles away. Rex was also sleeping peacefully for the first time in a week. His paws twitching as he dreamed. And in his dreams, he was running through a field with Sarah by his side. Both of them whole and healthy and together. Exactly as they were meant to be. The nursing staff began calling it the Rex effect. Other doctors came to observe Sarah, reviewing her charts with scientific skepticism that melted into reluctant wonder. Dr. Chun started documenting everything meticulously, knowing this case would need to be studied, understood, and possibly replicated. Because Sarah Mitchell and Rex hadn't just survived their trauma, they'd proven something that medicine was only beginning to understand, that healing isn't just a physical process. Sometimes, the strongest medicine doesn't come in a pill or through a surgery. Sometimes it comes on 4 paws, with a wagging tail, and the kind of love that literally keeps hearts beating. By day 8, Sarah was standing with assistance. By day 9, she was walking short distances. And every single day, twice a day, Sergeant Bradley would call with updates on Rex, and Sarah's vitals would stabilize even further at the sound of his name. The miracle wasn't just that they survived. The miracle was that they were healing each other from 20 miles apart, connected by a bond that neither science nor distance could break. And the real story, the one that would change hospital policy forever, was only just beginning. 3 weeks after the shooting, on a crisp November morning, Sarah Mitchell walked out of Denver General Hospital on her own 2 feet. No wheelchair, no walker. Just her mother on one side, her father on the other, and waiting at the bottom of the hospital step-stale, wagging so hard his entire body shook, was Rex. The reunion was captured by every news camera in Denver. The image of Sarah, still pale and moving carefully, but smiling radiantly, dropping to her knees to embrace her German Shepherd partner, would make the front page of newspapers across the country. But what the cameras didn't capture was the whispered conversation between them, the promises exchanged, the understanding that they'd both been given a second chance that most people never received. "We made it, boy," Sarah murmured into Rex's fur. "We both made it." Rex's response was to lick away the tears streaming down her face, his tail never stopping its joyful movement. But Sarah's story didn't end at those hospital steps. It began there. 2 months later, Hospital Administrator Patricia Wong stood before the Denver General Hospital Board of Directors with a comprehensive presentation titled, "The Mitchell-Rex Protocol, Animal-Assisted Intervention in Critical Care Settings." The boardroom was packed, not just with hospital board members, but with representatives from medical journals, other hospital administrators, veterinary professionals, and the media. On November 15th, we made a decision that broke every protocol we had. Patricia began, her voice steady and confident. We allowed a police canine to visit his critically ill handler in our ICU. Many of you said it was reckless. Some called it dangerous. A few suggested I'd lost my mind. She paused, a slight smile crossing her face. You weren't entirely wrong to be concerned. But I'm here today to show you what happened when we chose compassion over protocol. The presentation that followed was devastating in its thoroughness. Patricia displayed Sarah's medical charts, showing the dramatic improvement in every measurable health metric following Rex's visit. She presented Dr. Rivera's veterinary reports, documenting Rex's equally miraculous recovery. She included statements from nurses, doctors, and even the other ICU patients who'd been present that day, all describing the tangible shift in the entire ward's atmosphere after the visit. But the most powerful evidence came from Dr. James Chun, who'd spent 2 months researching and documenting everything. He presented peer-reviewed studies on human-animal bonding, physiological responses to emotional support, and the measurable benefits of animal-assisted therapy. Then he overlaid Sarah's recovery data onto expected recovery trajectories for similar trauma patients. Officer Mitchell's recovery exceeded expectations by 47%, Dr. Chun stated, pointing to the graphs. Her need for pain medication decreased by 62% faster than average. Her physical therapy participation was 93% higher than typical patients with comparable injuries. Her psychological assessment scores showed no signs of PTSD, highly unusual for shooting victims. And she was discharged 11 days earlier than projected for her injury severity. The room was silent as the implications sank in. "I'm not claiming Rex's visit was the sole factor in her recovery," Dr. Chun continued, "but I am stating unequivocally that it was a significant factor, one that we, as medical professionals, cannot afford to ignore." The board voted unanimously to implement the Rex protocol, a formal program allowing critically ill patients to receive carefully controlled visits from their companion animals when deemed therapeutically beneficial by their medical team. Denver General became the first hospital in Colorado to establish such a program in critical care settings. Within 6 months, 12 other patients participated in the program. A cancer patient whose cat visited showed improved response to chemotherapy. A heart attack survivor whose dog visited had better cardiovascular recovery. A trauma victim whose service animal visited showed reduced anxiety and faster wound healing. The success rate was undeniable. Medical journals published studies. Other hospitals began implementing similar programs. The Denver General model became a case study in medical schools nationwide. And at the center of it all was the photograph Sarah and Rex in that ICU room, her hand in his fur, both of them healing each other, that hung in the hospital's main corridor with a plaque reading, "Sometimes the best medicine has 4 paws and unconditional love." Sarah never returned to street patrol. The physical toll of her injuries made active duty impossible. But she found a new calling that suited her even better. She became the Denver Police Department's Canine Unit Coordinator, revolutionizing how the department understood and supported the bond between officers and their dogs. She implemented mandatory mental health support for canine handlers, created protocols for keeping partners together during medical emergencies, and established the first-ever support system for police dogs experiencing trauma. She also became a speaker, traveling to medical conferences and police academies across the country. Her presentation, "The Invisible Leash: Understanding the Life-Saving Bond Between Officers and Canine Partners," brought audiences to tears and changed minds about the depth of human-animal connections. Rex, now 8 years old, officially retired from active police duty. He spent his days as Sarah's constant companion, and twice a month, as a certified therapy dog, visiting other officers recovering from injuries at Denver General Hospital. Patients who'd never seen a police canine up close found comfort in Rex's gentle presence, and more than one officer credited Rex's visits with helping them through their darkest recovery days. The bond between Sarah and Rex remained as powerful as ever. They still had their synchronized moments times when Rex would suddenly become alert seconds before Sarah experienced phantom pain from her injuries, or when Sarah would wake from nightmares to find Rex already at her bedside, ready to comfort her before she even called for him. 5 years after the shooting, Sarah was invited to testify before the Colorado State Legislature about a proposed bill that would formally recognize the psychological bond between service animals and their handlers as a protected relationship in medical settings. She brought Rex with her. 5 years ago, I was dying in an ICU bed, Sarah told the assembled legislators, her voice clear and strong. Not just from my physical wounds, but from a broken heart. The hospital had every reason to say no when my family asked if Rex could visit. It broke their protocols. It challenged their liability insurance. It set a precedent they weren't sure they wanted to set. But they said yes anyway, and that decision saved 2 lives, mine and his. She paused, looking down at Rex, who sat perfectly still beside her chair. His dark eyes fixed on her face with the same devotion they'd always held. This isn't about making hospitals allow every pet to visit every patient, Sarah continued. It's about recognizing that, for some of us, our animals aren't just pets. They're partners, family, lifelines. They're the difference between surviving and actually living. The research proves it. The data supports it. My heartbeat proves it. She placed her hand over her heart. Because when Rex walked into my ICU room, my heart remembered how to beat properly again. The bill passed unanimously. Colorado became the first state to formally recognize animal-assisted intervention as a legitimate medical treatment option in critical care settings, with appropriate safeguards and protocols. 10 years after the shooting, on the anniversary of that terrible November night, Sarah stood at a podium at Denver General Hospital for the dedication of the new Mitchell Rex Center for Animal-Assisted Healing, a specialized wing where patients could safely interact with therapy animals as part of their treatment plans. Beside her sat Rex, now 13 years old, gray-muzzled and moving slowly, but still alert and present. A decade ago, a hospital made an impossible choice, Sarah said to the crowd of hundreds of doctors, nurses, patients, canine officers, and advocates from across the country. They chose to see me as a whole person, not just a collection of injuries. They understood that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about reconnecting what's been torn apart. She reached down to stroke Rex's head, and his tail thumped against the stage floor. Rex and I were given a gift that night in the ICU, the gift of each other when we needed it most. But the real gift was what came after, the understanding that love, in all its forms, is medicine. That connection is healing. That sometimes the most advanced medical treatment is allowing a dying patient to touch their dog's fur one more time. The center opened to overwhelming demand. Within its first year, over 300 patients participated in animal-assisted therapy sessions, with documented improvements in pain management, recovery times, and psychological well-being. Sarah continued her work coordinating the K9 unit until her retirement at age 55. Rex remained by her side until he passed away peacefully at age 14, with Sarah holding him and whispering the same words she'd whispered in that ICU room a decade earlier. Good boy. Such a good boy. The best boy. His ashes were scattered in the field behind the police training facility where they'd first met, where they'd learned to trust each other, where their partnership had begun.